Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. If you are someone who loves digging into the actual on-the-ground mechanics of how massive global defense shifts happen, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today we're looking at a totally foundational upgrade for the Indian infantry soldier. We are talking about the critical transition from outdated, highly problematic gear to the modern AK-203 assault rifle. We're going to break down exactly what this means, not just for the Johans on the front lines, but for the entire geopolitical landscape.
Okay, let's dive into this. So, for decades, the Indian Army relied heavily on the standard issue INSAS, that's the Indian Small Arms System. But honestly, it was fraught with battlefield problems. The solution? The modern AK-203 assault rifle. And look, this isn't just some minor tweak. It's a literal, game-changing, life-or-death upgrade for the infantry. But what makes this story so incredibly fascinating is that India isn't just buying these weapons off the shelf. They're stepping up to manufacture them entirely domestically. Here's a quick look at our agenda for today. First, phasing out the INSAS. Second, the Indo-Russian joint venture. Third, the strategic and economic impact. Fourth, navigating global geopolitical hurdles. And finally, future-proofing and exports.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, phasing out the INSAS.
Now, what's really interesting about this transition is that to truly appreciate the new tech, we first have to understand the deadly problem that forced the shift. Historically, the Indian infantry was equipped with the 5.56mm INS rifle. But that weapon faced severe criticism out on the battlefield. Just imagine being in the freezing, high-altitude environment of the Himalayas, and your rifle suffers from severe jamming. That's a terrifying reality. Plus, it fundamentally lacked stopping power. The direct answer to those fatal flaws is the 7.62 by 39mm AK-203. It is renowned for its ruggedness, its highly reliable and extremely harsh conditions, and it delivers far superior stopping power.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Indo-Russian joint venture.
So because the solution wasn't just a simple import order, India actually partnered up with Russia to bring this manufacturing capability straight to Indian soil. If we look at the timeline, way back in 1998, the INSAS was first inducted. Fast forward through years of operational frustration, and the timeline shifts significantly in 2019. That's when Prime Minister Modi and President Putin jointly inaugurated the IRRPL facility in Amethi, Uttar Pradesh. After navigating some pretty complex delays of repricing and technology transfer, we finally hit a major milestone in 2024, with the factory becoming fully operational and that very first batch delivered to the Army.
Now, pulling off a project this massive obviously brings in the heavy hitters. You've got the Indian Ordnance Factory Board teaming up with Russia's Kalashnikov Concern and Rosaborn Export. But, amidst all these giant defense corporations and government bodies, the ultimate beneficiary is the lone Indian infantry soldier deployed out on the front lines. Every single corporate negotiation and factory setup was fundamentally about getting a reliable weapon into their hands.
Which brings us to Section 3. The strategic and economic impact of this defense shift. Okay, 600,000. Just think about that number for a second. The ripple effects of this joint venture go way beyond just upgrading a firearm. That is a staggering requirement. 600,000 AK-203 rifles are needed by the Indian military, and every single one of those hundreds of thousands of rifles is slated to be manufactured right in Amethi, Uttar Pradesh.
There are three core strategic pillars to this project that you absolutely need to know. Number one, enhancing infantry lethality. As we just discussed, the ruggedness and stopping power of the AK-203 directly boosts the combat effectiveness of Jawans. That's totally crucial for counter-insurgency operations in Kashmir and for deployments along the incredibly harsh borders with China. Number two, 100% technology transfer. The contract strictly mandates a phased increase in indigenous content. And number three, the UP Defense Corridor. By situating this massive factory in Amethi, it acts as an anchor for the broader Uttar Pradesh Defense Industrial Corridor. It's generating local employment and fostering a whole new ecosystem of micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, that'll supply parts and accessories.
So the crucial point here is that 100% figure. I really want to linger on this because it's vital. 100% technology transfer means India isn't just shipping in parts and screwing them together on an assembly line. No, they are acquiring the complete metallurgical and manufacturing know-how. The end goal is the ability to build world-class small arms entirely independently, from raw material to the finished rifle. That is a massive leap in strategic self-reliance.
All right, on to Section 4, navigating global geopolitical hurdles.
Look, setting up a massive international defense partnership in the modern era is, well, it's rarely straightforward.
Domestically, this joint venture directly supports the Make in India initiative, and it definitely cements Russia as a foundational defense partner. But globally, this partnership had to advance through a diplomatic minefield, pushing forward despite massive Western pressure on New Delhi to cut ties with Moscow over the ongoing Ukraine conflict.
And that conflict didn't just cause diplomatic tension. It created very real logistical roadblocks on the ground for the plant in Amethi. International sanctions placed on Russian banks made establishing payment mechanisms incredibly complex. That financial friction directly caused delays in delivering the specialized Russian machinery required to actually set up the factory lines in Uttar Pradesh. Couple that with intense, prolonged negotiations over royalty payments and the exact depth of the technology transfer, and you can really start to see why it took until 2024 to get that first batch out the door.
Finally, Section 5, Future-Proofing and Exports.
Now that production is finally rolling, we have to look at the longevity of this weapon, and this brilliantly illustrates why the AK-203 is such a big deal. Unlike older AK models that were notoriously difficult to upgrade, the AK-203 features built-in Picatinny rails. Think of these like tactical Lego blocks for soldiers. This modularity means they can quickly snap on modern optical sights, mount laser pointers, or equip underbarrel grenade launchers right there based on mission requirements. It effectively future-proofs the infantry.
Okay, let's quickly lock in what we've learned today. If you want to keep the most vital takeaways from this explainer top of mind, these are your high-retention flashcard buzzwords. Indo-Russian rifles, PVT-LT. That's the joint venture vehicle. Technology transfer represents the 100% metallurgical know-how India is acquiring. The UP defense corridor is that economic MSME ecosystem anchored in Amethi. And infantry modernization, that is the ultimate goal, phasing out the jamming INSAS for lethal reliability on the borders.
So, what does this all mean for the future? India obviously needs over 600,000 of these rifles for its own military. But once that massive requirement is finally met and the Amethi plant is running at full independent capacity, a pretty huge question remains. Will we see Uttar Pradesh transform into the world's next major AK export hub for friendly nations? It's a fascinating geopolitical shift, for sure. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes on how this massive defense story continues to unfold.